So this year, it is truly our pleasure to have the Turnbulls as our opening keynote speakers. Rud and Ann Turnbull have been professors, researchers, and advocates for individuals with disabilities, their families, and service providers for over 4 decades. Between them, they have authored over 40 books and over 500 articles and chapters. In 1999, they were selected as 2 of 36 individuals who have changed the course of history for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities in the 20th century. Their greatest learning has come from their late son, Jay Turnbull, whom they have always called their best professor about the needs of individuals with significant disabilities over the lifespan. With that said, we have, and I, of course, left my other part of my sheet over there.
We always have a backup plan.
Yes. With that said, we have a little surprise for Rud and Ann. So would the two of you please come up to accept the TASH's 2017 Lifetime Achievement Award.
That is such a wonderful surprise. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. It is such a privilege to be here, and we're really kind of caught without words here.
That's never true of Ann.
It's wonderful to be in my home state of Georgia. My second home state where I went to school is Alabama. And I want to thank the good people of Alabama and the African American women and men who delivered Alabama. These brave men and women have really taken us to integrity and dignity and justice, and I've never been prouder to have roots in Alabama than I am right now. Well, thank you, Ruthie, for this honor and privilege of sharing with you. Rud and I have had such a good time working on this presentation about what we have learned over the 4.5 decades of our work combined. That's almost 100 years. This fall.
I feel that old too, some days.
What's that?
Never mind, just keep talking.
This fall, Rud was I was going to say Rud was 150.
See what I mean?
This fall, Rud was 80, and about 3 weeks later, I was 70. And so that's how we got our title, of 150 years. I said, Rud, why don't you be 120? I'll be 30.
Developmentally, I'm younger than that.
Now, the title is 10 plus. We ended up with 13 truths that we want to share from 150 or 200 years. And the way we got the 200 was we'll just take you back in time about almost 40 years to our family when they were young. We were starting out in this field. our best professor, Jay Turnbull, was teaching us the way. As those of you know who knew Jay so well, he had very high expectations for himself, and he wanted us to figure out how to make it happen. And this is Jay at his 40th birthday party. He loved to sing, loved music. There were about 100 people out in front singing along with him, and it was a very happy occasion. Never would we have dreamed that about 6 months later, he very suddenly, unexpectedly took his last breath, had a major cardiac arrest, and at that time he was 41. And what a legacy he has left. When Jay was first born, he was identified as having an intellectual disability. As he got to be about 10 or 12 years old, he picked up the label of autism. And his greatest challenge as he moved to adulthood was having a rapid cycling bipolar disorder. And you put those three things together, and he had a needed comprehensive support, but as we'll tell you in some of our truths, that support was able to be actualized, and he had what I'll also tell you about, a very enviable life. Well, this is us at our 150th celebration with our daughters and grandchildren. That was this fall. We had a wonderful time. Now here's Rud. 80 is the new 50.
This is proof that there is no fool like an old fool.
And, hey, I was zipping through the air, having a wonderful time. I don't know if my grandchildren or I enjoyed it more, but it was really fabulous.
Fearless female.
So, as we've reflected on these 150 years, and the way in the title we got 200 is Jay had the same 0 birthday that we had. So if Jay were living today, he would have been 50 this year, and we would have been a total of 200. And because his spirit lives, and because we continue to draw strength from him, we are really thinking of what our family has learned over 200 years. So with that, Rud, take it away.
Sweat. When I was a freshman in high school, I entered the classroom of Bill Armstrong. He had an oxen yoke on his desk, and on the blackboard behind him were written the words, "Before the gates of excellence, the high gods have placed sweat." Bill Armstrong taught me that you don't have excellence without sweat. Several years later, Jay was born. And as Robin has said earlier this morning, where's the time zone? As Robin said, Jay was our best professor. He, a little SOB, he would always give us the final exam before he gave us the course. Does that sound familiar to you all? You've been there, haven't you?
You know, Mary, you remember.
So we kept having to learn, and once we thought we got it right, he once again changed the rules on us. And so the only thing we could do is to imagine where he wanted to go, what kind of a life he wanted to have. And we had to imagine the means. Do we have Hesiod up there?
Yes.
We had to imagine the means. What we learned is the first part of Hesiod, which is that before the gates of excellence, the high gods have placed sweat. What we also learned is that once you sweat, you mop your brow, you have no other choice but to keep going forward and sweat again, and then walk again and sweat again and walk again. You have to imagine the goal, and then you imagine the means. and you have directness of purpose. You let nothing get in your way of where you want to be. But what Hesiod said at the end is that we have to relish the journey. It has been, with Jay, an extraordinarily difficult journey, but it has also been an extraordinarily rewarding journey. And when you reach those gates of excellence, there is absolute joy. And so the first thing that we have learned is that sweat is the evidence of excellence, and sweat is the promise of joy.
Okay. Rud, is it right that you would put that on your syllabus for students?
I do. I put it on my syllabus. Well, my KU people over here know that I put it on my syllabus as the students, and immediately they all want to disenroll. It's a required course, so they can't leave.
Okay, our second truth that we've learned is seek the enviable life. And the way we came to enviable life was when Jay was finishing high school, and this was in the late 80s, and everyone in our community transitioned to a group home of about 6 people and a sheltered workshop. And Jay didn't want to go there, and we didn't want Jay to go there. Supported employment was starting in Oregon and some other places around the country. But the feeling from the high school and adult providers is that Jay's problem was we were unrealistic, and we denied the extent of his disability, and that's he would be lucky to make it in that setting. Well, after this was part of the high school program to transition to these places, so they would be there when they were 21, these segregated places. And we felt that if we were both on the board of directors, if we worked hard enough on the board, and if we joined with our friends in the community, that we could change that system. But we were very unsuccessful in changing that system. We failed, despite the sweat. But when Jay's younger sister, Kate, first went to see him after he had moved into the group home, she visited him for a couple of hours, and she came home and she was really quiet and obviously troubled and obviously irked. And I kept saying, Kate, what are you thinking? How did it go? What's wrong? And she finally said, Mom, you wouldn't want to live there. I wouldn't want to live there. Why is it okay for Jay to live there? Boy, that's getting comeuppance, isn't it, from your 10-year-old daughter? Really, really true that she cut through what everyone else in the professional circle and the community circle were trying to justify of let's make this program better. And so we started thinking, what would it take for Jay to have a life that Kate would want to live herself? Or we would, that we would want to live there, Kate would want to live there. And we kind of thought, maybe we didn't want to say to get a quality of life or to get an appropriate life or get a successful life. And so we coined get a enviable life. And when we knew that Jay had a life that had no second-class citizenship, then that would be the life that we were seeking. Let me ask you that, let's see, this was how many years ago? 35 years ago, when we were seeking an enviable life. How many of you know at least 10 people with truly significant disabilities? Not mild, not moderate, truly significant. How many do you know? How many know at least 10? Okay.
Boy, that's extraordinary.
That's the most hands. I've asked that question around the world, and that's the most hands that I've ever seen gone up, and that's what TASH stands for. But let me tell you, friends, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of adults, and we're going to talk about that later, who don't have an enviable life. And so to seek the enviable life is our second truth.
The third one requires a preface. The preface is this: we are all adults, and we do not mind a certain amount of ribaldry. Is that correct? A little bit of sidebar raunchiness. Is that okay too? Is that all right with you? Okay. You will understand when I tell you the story why we cannot show the next slide. That's a teaser. It's Christmas time in Lawrence, Kansas. Our next door neighbor is a very social person. She's a dear friend of ours, and she has invited us, including Jay, to the Christmas party. Jay's at the door. He's greeting people as they come in. He's very social. He's having a grand time. He's very appropriate. And in the door come some people whom we do not know. They are friends of our neighbors who come from St. Louis. Jay says good evening to the lady and says, would you like a glass of wine or beer or scotch? It's a pretty good start. Pretty good start. And she said, I'd be delighted to have a glass of wine, thank you. And then he turns to the man, he shakes hands, he says, I'm Rud Turnbull. Don't touch your penis in public. So we turn to Jay and say, Jay, don't talk about touching your penis in public. Whereupon Jay says, and don't talk about touching your penis in public. I mean, I said, Jay, I want a double scotch right away. Immediately. Bring that baby to daddy. Look, the title of the lesson is Expect the Unexpected. There is absolutely no way that any of us can anticipate what people with disabilities will do. That includes what a husband will do to a wife. She can't anticipate some of the things that I come up with. And we want things to be in our control. That's the kind of people we are. We're type A, take charge people. But we can't take charge of everything. We cannot do anything except to expect the unexpected. We are prisoners of the luck of the day. We are prisoners of the luck of the day. There will be epiphanies that come to us, and they will be surprising and welcome, and they will be part of those very difficult days that also come to us. We cannot do anything except expect the unexpected. And now you know why the slide is blank. We can't show that in public.
Rud went on the internet looking for a picture, and I said, no, Rud.
No.
Okay. Our fourth truth is to nurture relationships. After Jay was expelled from the adult program for hitting and choking one person in the group home and sheltered workshop every time he saw him, and that one person was the son of a state legislator. Jay didn't last long, but as we were setting up his real life of a home of his own and a job at the university and friends and places to go and things to do, there came a time when we realized that he really needed to use public transportation and not just have his parents or his housemates drive him places. But we were scared of Jay using a taxi because we thought, well, what if the taxi driver steals his money? What if the taxi driver bullies him? kind of worst case scenario. What if the taxi driver drives him off somewhere and molests him? And you hate to think of these things. And you want to think it doesn't happen, but you know that what if it does happen? And so in affirming to nurture relationships, we decided that I would go to the local taxi company and see what we might do. And I didn't know what to say to the local taxi company. I didn't want to accuse them of things. But I found the local taxi company in a trailer on the edge of town in a dirt gravel parking lot. And I went, and the owner, Shirley, was sitting, she was dispatching. And I walked in, and it looked like a scene out of the 1950s. And so I started telling her about Jay. And she kept listening and nodding, like Carl Rogers in Unconditional Counseling had been her major professor. Nodding and saying, I understand, and if I were Jay's mother, I would feel the same way. What else are you worried about? What else? And so I finally get to the molesting, and I feel foolish, except she embraces me. She opens her desk drawer, and she pulls out these two little crinkled, these are not crinkled, but imagine them crinkled, pieces of construction paper, a red one and a green one. And she said, I'm giving you my green card of friendship. I'm giving you my green card of problem solving. I'm giving you my green card of caring about your son. And tears started coming down my eyes. I could not believe I was in a trailer of a taxi company and I was getting this kind of unconditional regard. And then I said, Shirley, what do you mean? And she said, Ann, many of you in the university don't realize that people like me want to give back, and we want to make a difference in the lives of people. So she said, every morning I wake up and I ask the good Lord to let me take as many red cards as possible. You've given me your red card of worry. You've given me your red card of fear, and I give you my green card. And then she went on to explain how she was going to take care of every one of my concerns, that she had like 22 drivers and she was going to match Jay with just one driver, and they were going to develop a friendship and trust. And then she said, I don't want to limit your son, so he'll develop another and another until he rides with all 22. She said, let me think about who the first one will be. She called me the next day and she told me she'd talk with Jim and he was going to be the first driver. And she laughed and she said, and Jim said, Shirley, why did you pick me? And Shirley said, and I said, Jim, you need a friend as much as Jay Turnbull needs one. So this truth is in the community, outside of the disability system, outside of the family system. There are these extraordinary people who have green cards to help make equality of opportunity possible, and they take red cards. And the more each of us give green cards, the more others are going to take our red cards. What goes around comes around. So this fourth truth is to give your green cards and to take your red cards. Nurture relationships throughout your work life and throughout your family and personal life. And that is me again, right? The next one is...
Go boldly into the unknown.
Wait, no, it's create your own, you're one step ahead. I was
I'm
slow.
a step ahead of you?
Yeah.
That's the first time in my life with you. Where am I?
And create your own village. These individual green card, red card relationships got put into a group process. And that we call the group process group action planning, because we had done too many person-centered planning sessions when Jay was having his I-plan, where we came up with all these great ideas, but then there was no action. Or the action had to be what we would do as a family Too many ideas were generated, too little were acted upon. So we said, we got to have action, and we can't do it all ourselves. We have 6 degrees between us. We couldn't do it all ourselves. What about typical families? And so we brought together our friends, and Mary Morningstar, we'll talk more about Mary later, was one of those at those meetings in our basement at Jay's house, and talking about how to put together this enviable life. And it took years. We talk about transition, maybe 18 to 21. It was probably, Jay was in his early 30s by the time his life was stable. And then as soon as it would get stable, a job coach would leave or a housemate would leave. I mean, we were rarely not in transition throughout his life. But at this one meeting, and because of time, I'm not going to show this. Mary was at this meeting. You remember Mary. We had been talking about what are we going to do if Rud and I go down in a plane or we die sooner rather than later, the fear in the heart of every family. And we had this amazing brainstorming among the people at that meeting. Our daughters were there, and they could hear that other people cared and would be there for them if something happened to Rud and me unexpectedly. And at the end of the meeting, we gave everyone a candle that had a different fragrance and a different color. And we ran around and lit the candles. And we said if it was only family light, this is the tiny light we would have. But when we light the candles for everyone, then we have a whole room of light. And then Jay and his music friends sang, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine." And one of his housemates said, "You are thanking us, but we thank you." Unity of being part of Jay's life. And so this truth is that you have to create your own village. And that own village comes from all of the relationships. You're taking those green and red card friends and you're putting them together. And there's such power to change the world when you have people who stick together over time through thick and thin to make enviable lives happen. And that's how Jay was able to have his own home and to work at the university and to have a life that he truly loved. It was the village. And now we're part of the lives of many other people in our community, and they keep thanking us. We say we're just passing on to the universe what was given to us. And that's what we all have to do, is to be part of the village. So now, Rud, you are ready for going boldly.
Wait, as I was saying, out of turn, we all live by mottos. One of them in my life is before the gates of excellence. The other is my family motto, which is fortune favors the brave. As you know, Jay has made us live that motto, and I want to tell you a story about that. As you know, also, he lived in a group home, and he didn't like it. He started by taking the pictures off the wall. We supplied the pictures. Of course, there are no pictures in a group home before we arrived. And then he attempted to tear his mattress. Have you ever tried to tear a mattress? It's pretty difficult to do. He didn't succeed, but the mattress didn't stay on the bed. And finally, he decided on absolutely the perfect way to express the fact that he didn't want to live there. And there was his housemate, tall, gangly, lovely man. And Jay, for some unexplained reason, chose that person to choke. Often. So often that we got to a point where we knew that we had to go. Now, let me tell you something about choking the son of the state senator. It wasn't just choke somebody, it was choke the son of the state senator, who, by the way, was married to the pediatrician who raised all the power elite in Little Lawrence, Kansas. So Jay picked exactly the right person. This was the ultimate statement of self-determination. Can you imagine any more perfect expression of autonomy than to choke the son of the state senator, because that guarantees you're out of there. So we had this meeting, and they were about ready to fire us, and we said, a nanosecond before they said that, we quit. We quit. Now, I put my papers into the briefcase, shut the briefcase, locked it up, and they said, what are you going to do? And we said, we don't know what we're going to do. But we're going to do something, and we're going to succeed. And that is not a threat. That is a promise. And then they said, and what will you do when you fail? And we said, we're not going to fail. And we walked out of there, went over to the group home, picked up Jay. He was so terribly depressed that we had to lift him into the car. We had to take him home, put him into bed, carrying him. He was so depressed. And that night, Ann and I are sitting together, free at last. Free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Free to do what? To go boldly into the unknown. We didn't know what the unknown was. Now, you know that I have a tendency to go a little bit off into the dark side of things here. So we thought, well, we have to create a corporation. What is its name? Full Citizenship. That's a good name. And that's not enough. We have to have a name that expresses our feeling about that system. Full, unadulterated citizenship for kids and youth opposed to unemployment. I mean, that's what they did to us, so we're going to do a little bit back to you.
Rud's other one after that, he said, well, we could be, they would want us to be full, unadulterated citizenship for kids in the United States.
Which was, ouch. Ow! And so we just reversed it. And at that time, after creating the corporation, we became our own service agency. But Mary Morningstar over here.
Stand up, Mary.
Mary Morningstar was our. She was our first executive director. Here's a photograph of Mary with Jay. Notice those very grown-up trousers she's wearing. Mickey Mouse on the butt.
Elvis Presley.
So we went boldly into the unknown. We really did not know what we would find there. But sometimes being brave, being foolish, means also that you have to have fun. And if you look back and find those moments of joy within those steps that you take into the unknown, where things are dark, also look for the joy and enjoy it.
It's so funny to think back. Okay, my friends, our next truth is be accountable for the whole life. And this is something that Jay taught us so much 30 years ago, that rights to an education stop at 21. There are no rights to adult services. There's been an emphasis on having money follow the person during adulthood, but in our experience, that has stalled in so many states. Mary, I see you're nodding. It's almost like we're no farther along now than we were 20 years ago. Those of you old-timers in TASH, do you remember Mary Aldrich? Mary was on the TASH board. She received the Inclusion Award because her son, Aaron, was an inclusion pioneer 25 years ago. Aaron is now 42. Mary struggles every day, all day long, in trying to get the supports for Aaron to live an enviable life. If you would not believe the things that come up on a day-to-day basis, that families who have the vision for full citizenship during adulthood are struggling to do. I've get frequent emails from Mary, several a week, and they're heartbreaking in terms of all of the barriers that the system still sets up for someone who wants their own home and someone who wants to choose their own folks. We were with some of you at a meeting not long ago and showed this lifespan where on the right side, those are the school years. That's just about 1/4 of somebody's life. You know, Aaron could live to be 80 years old. What's going to happen to him over time? And what are you doing? You're doing kind of a Donald Trump behind Hillary, remember? I would never call you Donald Trump.
I have a hearing impairment, thank God.
So we call these the big four, what IDEA and ADA promises: equality of opportunity, independent living, full participation in economic self-sufficiency. And my friends, it's not happening. And if we want results over the lifespan, everybody in here has to be part of the solution. And I urge all of you to connect with one person at a minimum who has very significant disabilities. That's what TASH stands for. And to walk with them in the journey day in and day out in order to create an enviable life. That will be some of the most powerful learning. You will learn more from doing that than from any conference, with all due respect to conferences, any book, any of the 500 articles that we have ever written. Live it. Walk the walk, because that's what it's going to take to transform our expectations and vision now at the school age level to people across this entire lifespan until they're 80 years old. Oh, wrong button. There we go.
The next lesson is breathe some. As you know, Jay had 3 disabilities. As you also know, he oftentimes acted out these challenging behaviors. He began to telegraph his anxiety, and if we couldn't intervene, then he became manic and eventually became self-injurious. As he started with the anxiety, we would say, Jay, breathe some, breathe some. And sometimes that worked, and sometimes it did not. Sometimes he had to be prevented from hurting himself, and that put us at risk as well. But his advice, our advice to him is good advice for all of us, that when we are anxious, when we think that things are out of control, especially when we're super anxious, we should just breathe some. We have to take good care of ourselves. We have a trinity of responsibilities. It's to our minds, our bodies, to our spirit. We are a vessel of gifts for other people. We don't want to damage the vessel. And so treat yourselves very kindly. Treat yourselves with compassion. Everybody, do this. Deep inhale. Breathe some.
You want to tell them about the marker?
After Jay died, it was in January. In June, we were walking down the sidewalk in front of the building, and there were the members of the Kansas University Beach Center staff standing by a tree. And they said, "Come on over here, take a look." And at the tree was this brass marker in honor of Jay Turnbull, KU employee for 20 years. What does it say? Breathe some. That's the next piece of advice. Breathe some.
Number 9. Recognize system impact. When it's not been very long ago when I got some really new insight into those very turbulent years of when Jay struggled in trying to transition to a segregated system that was not going to change, and then creating his enviable life. You know, and maybe in a perfect family system, everybody in the family would have their piece of the pie, you know, and their piece of the pie being the time, the energy, the resources, so that that gets equally divided among family members. Jay has 2 younger sisters, Kate and Amy. Well, during the difficult years, it is very conservative to say Jay took half of the family bandwidth. He probably more likely at that time took 3/4, and it wasn't that he took it, the system took it. We were spending more time trying to get the system to work than we were in direct time with Jay and with our daughters. And so what I look back on and really feel still irked and angry about is the toll that the system extracted on our family because it was not providing adult supports that were worth having. But what was so interesting to me is that Jay's sisters, who are both amazingly wonderful, I learned some of their own insights. Kate is now a therapist, and she has tremendous empathy, tremendous ability to stand in the shoes of others and to support them. And Kate and I were doing a workshop a couple of years ago on sibling support. And one of the points we were making is how family time needs to be roughly equally distributed. And so as we were working on our presentation, I drew a pie chart that looked like this. And I said, Kate, when I look back, this is kind of what I feel was going on for a number of years, that Rud and I weren't thinking about our personal needs. We were trying to keep working, but we were answering that phone every day of what Jay's latest behavioral challenges were and hitting and choking the senator's son. And when Kate looked at this, she said, Mom, that's not how it was for me. You know, that's not my perception of it. And I said, what's your perception? And she drew this. And it was heartbreaking because she said that for her and Amy Rud and I were often working when we weren't advocating for Jay. Amy has an amazing ability to advocate for herself and could very forthrightly express her preferences. Kate is the third child and is not as forthright as Amy. Kate said, I really tried to take up as little of the family time as I could because I knew that we were also overloaded. And what I realized, and it was heartbreaking, because of the age difference, Kate is 11 years younger than Jay. And so when Jay was 17, 18, 19, 20, when he was having these challenges, Kate was 6 and 7 and 8. This was her childhood. She wasn't close in age. She wasn't a teenager going out with peers and doing her own thing. She was a little girl. And Jay's hardest transition years was Kate's childhood. And I want you to know that when the system fails, and it's happening now with Mary Aldrich, it's happening with other friends in North Carolina whose lives we are very much part of right now. I had a good friend text me yesterday and said, my husband thinks he's lost his wife because she's so often at her son's new condo trying to support him overnight when he's not able to sleep. Remember that it's what a devastating impact it can have when families have to advocate so hard and so long that other important priorities have to be let go because we can't get more than 24 hours in the day.
Never lose your capacity for outrage, nor your capacity to respond and to prevail. The setting is the Western Carolina Center for Developmental Disabilities. I've been appointed to a task force by the governor to investigate something that is known as aversive intervention. I go out there, big conference table, 25 or so professionals, and they begin to talk about the Learning to Be Better box. Oh, well, interesting. What's the Learning to Be Better box? Oh, they say it's a little box that we use to teach people to be better, to use more appropriate behavior. And I said, oh, that's interesting. What does it look like? He said, well, it's just a little wooden box. I said, what does it look like? It's just a little wooden box. I said, listen, I've asked you a question 3 times, and you ducked the question 3 times. The governor appointed me. I've got a report to write. Now, I'll give you a choice. I'm going to write a report in which I say, you refuse to produce the evidence. Or I'm going to write a report in which you say, you produce the evidence. And what do you want? Well, we'll get the box. I said, good, go get it. Well, it's across campus. I'll show it to you at lunchtime. I said, I don't want to see it at lunchtime. I want to see it now. You go get that box and bring it here. Oh, they went across the campus, got the box. It's about 4 inches wide, 4 inches high, a couple of inches deep. It's got 2 battery nodules on top with a little copper wire. I said, what do you do with it? So, and a little flip on the side. And so, well, when somebody misbehaves, when Ruthie Marie misbehaves, we chase her down, and then we lift up her shirt and we apply the box to her lower abdomen. It's a sensitive place. So, yeah, it is a sensitive place. You got that much right, everything else is wrong. I said, do you ever use it on yourself? Have you ever tried it on yourself? Oh, no, it's for them. I said, give me that damn box. And I took off my jacket. Turned on the box and I put it on my arm and I jumped. And I went back to my boss and I said, boss, something's rotten in the state of North Carolina. And for heaven's spite, I have been born to set it right. And that's how I got into this business as a professional. Never lose your capacity for outrage and never lose the ability to strategically respond. gather the facts, gather the demonstrative evidence, gather the narratives, find out what the law is, and if the law isn't right, change the law, and then apply it. What we have to do is to argue on the basis of principle, and that's what TASH has been doing ever since Doug Guest was the editor, the first editor of this journal. And when we argue on the basis of principle, law, and facts, we don't have to scream with moral outrage, although that's a pretty good strategy too. Rabbi Hillel, if not you, who? If not now, when? Never lose those two capacities.
Okay, I believe you. And
That's a first.
grow your best effort. One of my fathers, I was growing up, anytime I would say I'd done my best, he'd say, you don't know what your best is. And he said, if every day you try to do just a little bit better than you were able to do the day before, your best isn't a fixed area. But if you do a little bit better every day, then your best grows in ever increasing circles. And so what I want to say to you is every day, if we're going to get to the promised land of enviable lives, we are going to have to do better every day than we were able to do yesterday. Keep pushing your best effort so it will continue to grow.
How are we
You
doing
just-
on time?
Yeah, I've got it.
We're okay?
Yeah, just
5 or 6 minutes ago?
go quickly.
She says go quickly.
I'm one to talk about quick, right?
Look, Frank Lasky, one of my heroes, is going to speak later this morning about the Andrew case. Ann and I have been fortunate enough to have met Andrew, to have had dinner with his family and with his younger brother. Don't take the research or the decisions or the legislation and be satisfied. Always ask the so what question. So, now that we know something, so, now that we have a right, so what? And the great challenge of the Andrew case is to answer the so what questions so that the guidelines that the Department of Education put out just 2 weeks ago will actually be law on the streets. Law on the books, yes. Law on the streets, yes. Don't fail to ask yourselves, so what? So what can I do now that we've got this next step forward?
Okay, number 10 here is to take action to enhance cultural justice. As we look back on our careers, one of our most satisfying times was partnering with our good friends Ursula and DJ Markey from New Orleans, who were civil rights leaders, who were leaders in the disability rights movement, who protected and supported those families in the 9th Ward whose houses got washed away in Katrina. And it was such a learning experience to me for Ursula to be honest and to tell me that I often didn't get racism nearly as much as I thought I got racism. And she would take me to the woodshed and she would say, Ann, this is a learning opportunity. And I would say, not another one. But she was so wonderful in letting me know in her community, research was a 4-letter word. In her community, she was sick of people from organizations and universities coming in for a drop of color and then leaving with the data to write it up and to never give it back to the community. I would often tease her when we were having these discussions about racism, and I would say, Ursula, I'm shaking in my white boots. And she said, well, okay, you know, you wear your white boots, I'm going to wear my black boots, and we're going to find our common ground. And one year for Christmas, she painted this picture for me. See where the heels meet at the bottom, there's a little heart.
Show what you got on.
Yeah.
Just take a look at those boots. Hands, lift your legs. Those are multicultural boots.
Ursula taught me to wear these. And Ursula drew my bright clothes and her African clothes. And but what we found is common ground. And what she taught me is it wasn't enough for me to talk the talk of cultural justice. I had to come to her community, and she had to vouch for me with her families. And then I had to share what we learned in our research. And it was enlightening to me. And when she died, I went up to her casket that was open in the church, and I said, Ursula, you, next to Jay, have been my greatest professor. And when you get to heaven, save me a seat, because we got to have a lot more conversations together. But what I want you to do is to reach out to people who have been marginalized and bring them to the table of decision making, and to walk the walk of taking action to ensure that there is social and cultural justice for all.
My last diligently pursue dignity. Diligently pursue dignity. We left the system. We created full citizenship. We hired Mary Morningstar, and then we went to our friend Jean Ann Summers, also at the University of Kansas. Jean Ann hired Jay. And this is a photograph of Jay with Jean Ann and with Pat Hughes, who initiated Jay into the SAE fraternity house. I'm not sure that was a good idea, because that was the animal house of the University of Kansas. But you know, in the animal house, you can scratch anywhere. You can make any noises with your body that are at all inappropriate elsewhere. But in any event, that's Pat Hughes, and that's a different story. The point is about dignity. Jay worked for 20 years, and when he died on a Wednesday, this headline in the newspaper of the University of Kansas the next morning said, KU mourns longtime employee Jay Turnbull. It didn't say KU mourns special needs adult. It didn't say Jay had disability. It didn't say anything like that. It said Jay Turnbull, 20-year employee of the University of Kansas, the lead headline. And at the funeral service, the memorial service, our little church sanctuary seated 750 people. There wasn't a seat available for anyone else to sit. It was absolutely full. Jay worked for 20 years. He had the dignity of working, and he taught other people about his inner worth, his own dignity. And what that service was about was that the community of Lawrence, Kansas itself recognized that it had an inherent dignity. And so when we dignify a person, we dignify all of us who are involved with Jay. And at the service, there were several eulogies, one by Mary, one by Mike Waymeyer, our colleague. And he said, what I learned is that we're not in the special education business. We're not in the rehabilitation business, Robin. We're not in this business or the other business. We are in the dignity business. Write it down. We are in the dignity business. Can you ever be in a better business? I think not.
And our last 13th truth is to never postpone joy. And we're going to end with that. And Chris is going to play this last video. We skipped one, Chris. And I want you to listen to Jay's sister, Kate, giving her eulogy, and then I'll comment on it. See if you can feel her joy.
The last time I saw Jay was over Thanksgiving break. He and I drove out to Wendy's parents' house to visit the animals. Wendy offered him a choice of 4 different pies, and Jay had a slice of 3 of them. He cleaned up after himself, he pet the cats, he gave Wendy a soft 5, and we were off. At the party, I'm sorry to say, Wendy really started when we got in the car. I was blasting the soundtrack to Hair, which was always one of Jay's favorites, and we were singing, shouting, more like it. He was doing his bounce and flapping his fingers, and his eyes were crossing a little like they did when he was really having a good time. But I looked over at one point, because it's hard to keep your eyes on the road when you are jamming out with Jay Turnbull, and he looked at me right in the eyes, and he had this little smile of joy, of contentment, and of love, and I thought, there is God. There is God. There is God.
Kate's last fun time with Jay, that was, as she said, during Thanksgiving holidays. She and I had gone shopping that day in Kansas City because she needed some new clothes for something that was coming up. We hadn't found them. And I said, Kate, let's just keep on until we find it. And she said, no, Mom. I told Jay that I'd be home and we'd go out to Wendy's, and I've got to do it. And about that time, her sister called her, who was also in Kansas City, and said, oh, Kate, let's have lunch together. And Kate said, no, Amy. I told Jay that we'd do this, and that's what I want to do. And never knowing this was the last time that she was going to be with him. But this 1 minute is so profound because they were sharing what they both loved. They both loved music, and they found that moment. They found that connection. They found their hearts together. And it is something that will sustain Kate for the rest of her life. Even though Kate realizes there's a lot of her childhood she gave up because of her brother. She loves no one in the world more than she loves her brother, and to never postpone joy for all of us. We think, oh, I've got to get one more task done. I've got to get one more proposal done. Oh, if I can just get all these meetings done, then I'll do something special with the people I love. Then I'll have joy after I get my work done. How many of you have thought that? And what Kate's lesson and Jay's lesson is never postpone joy, because we'll never get all of our work done. But we have to sprinkle that work with the joy and especially the connection with the people we love the most. And so, I want you all, and Rud wants you, to think, what are your top 2? Let's go through this list, and we're going to ask each of you to choose 2 truths that you think can best enhance your enviable life and the enviable life of the people you love, and for you to commit this morning to taking these. So we have Redless, a sweat, seek enviable life, expect the unexpected. Remember what Jay said at the door? Nurture relationships.
Hope you'll never forget that one.
Create your own village. Go boldly into the unknown. Be accountable for whole life. Breathe some. Recognize system impact. Never lose the capacity for outrage. Grow your best effort every day. Ask and act upon the so what question. pursue dignity diligently, and never postpone joy. Do you have your two? Claim those two, and when you reach your 150 years, we hope you will look at those two and on so many other truths of what has truly brought quality of life to you. So now we're 150. We think that 80 is the new 50 and 70 is the new 40. And so we're going to be around for a long, long time to hear the stories of your truth. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. We had such a wonderful time putting this together because it really enabled us to think about what withstands the test of time.